Hey.
All right, so
Hi.
we talked for The Odd Life of Timothy Green, and at the end of that interview, you said, "I'll tell you a story I haven't told anyone." And Joel Edgerton and I leaned forward in our seats, and you told the story of how, when you were filming that movie, your wife got a call about your son Lucas, where somebody wanted him to audition for a film.
Yes.
And that's kind of where that all started. So can you fill in the gap here from that interim? You told it at the time as a sort of lesson in parenting that you and your wife kind of...
Yes. Well, what happened was she called me and said, well, first of all, Lucas had been in this play in 7th grade and had given this performance that had rocked the audience because all the other kids were very good, but they were performative, and Lucas came out and was real. And the theater, he had a moment where the entire theater gasped because his emotion was so pure. And even at intermission, I ran into some high school kids in high school. I said, "Why are you guys here?" And they said, "Well, we're required to see the play." And I said, "Why would they require you to see the middle school play?" And they said, "No, they made us come see Lucas in the play." And so I went off to cast The Odd Life of Timothy Green. I was in L.A., and Susan, my wife, calls and says, "They want Lucas to audition for this movie." And I said no. I said, "Well, why did you say no?" And she said, "Because our friends, we have a few friends who had said, don't ever let your kids be in movies." They're kind of prominent actors who said, don't let your kids be in movies, it could really mess them up. So Susan felt pretty good that she had said that he could do movies when he was 18. And I remember looking at my desk and the wall, I had all these pictures of kid actors, and I said, "Well, then I'm going to go to hell." And she said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, I had 10 kids in Dan in real life, and I'm looking for 2 kids for Timothy Green, and if I thought a kid being in a movie would destroy their life, then I would never put them in, I would never make a movie with a kid in it." And all I said was, "Did you ever think of asking Lucas what he wants to do?" And my wife went, "That's kind of a good idea." And so she went off and called me back and said, "Well, I asked him if he wanted to audition for a movie." And I said, "Well, what did he say?" He said, "Well, he said he just had one question. And his question was, is Dad going to direct the movie?" And she said, "No." And he said, "Then I'm interested." And that audition was for a movie that he didn't get, he almost got, but that led to Moonrise Kingdom and everything that followed. So it wasn't, if I had not said, "Why don't you ask Lucas what he wants to do?" he would never have been in Moonrise Kingdom, and we wouldn't.
Is that what you told him to convince him to make this film? Because he has had this reticence, right, to work with you.
No, he had an understandable reticence. Yeah. One, because he's working with directors who are much better than me. No, genuinely. I mean, 2 movies with Wes Anderson, Jason Reitman, Noah Baumbach, Terry Gilliam, Greta Gerwig, what a great movie. Joel Edgerton now, and Jonah Hill.
But you know when to sneeze that.
I know, but I'm his dad, and who wants to? I mean, really, you know.
Yeah.
And I think early on, it was because he wanted to get the part on his own merit. But then as he thought about it, it's like, who wants to be directed by their father, particularly at an age when the fun part of being 20 and 21 is that you fire your parents, you know, you're free of them, right?
Right.
So I got it, I understood. I just wanted to write something that he would want to be in were I not his father. Because if I've done that, then I've written something he would be proud of. And our other son, Simon, who isn't an actor, but I really wanted to, you want your kids to be proud of you. And I wanted to write something that I think they thought would be the kind of story I should be telling. Mm-hmm. And there had been some concern, particularly Simon had articulated, you know, can you make movies like Gilbert Grape and About a Boy, which I didn't direct either of those, but I got to write on them. and Pieces of April can't make movies like that. And I said, I will. Sometimes you make movies for families, and sometimes you make movies for adults. And anyway, this was my attempt to make something urgent and necessary. And that's funny that I told you that story. You were probably the first one to ever hear that story.
So is Julia's character in some ways an avatar for you? She plays a power mom who's exercising as much control as she can, but feeling that control slipping away from her.
Absolutely. Holly is that person who does not give up on her kid. And in this case, she's a mother. Often fathers, too, don't give up. But I feel that the mother-son bond, the mother-daughter bond, the mother-to-child bond is a particularly interesting one for me, because I had a mom who was fierce, and while my mother was an addict, she's no longer living, that's why I say was, but she did find recovery when I was 15, and
That's when she returned to the family, right?
Yeah,
she was away for a while.
Yeah, she did. She left when I was 7, and when I was 15, she stopped drinking one day at a time. And for the last 22 years of her life, she devoted all of her energies to helping other people. But Holly, I wanted to write a fierce, loving, blinded by love, powerful mom, and but I drew on my own mom, my wife, who is just one of the most fierce and formidable and impressive women I've ever known, and my sister, and so many of my great female friends who are just uncompromised, and I liked the idea that she would have to go. She's willing to go anywhere and goes everywhere on behalf of her kid.
Yeah.
I felt that would be a way into telling this story, which I decided pretty early on once I started writing would take place over one day and be about one family. Because the enormity of the epidemic, the vastness of addiction and how it impacts society and prisons and our economy and our well-being, spiritual and psychological well-being as a country, that is so massive. But I felt if I could focus it all onto this one family in one day, that I could, if I was just trying to serve these characters and tell this story, that I might be able to shine some light on parts of this story that are in a lot of communities and a lot of circles not talked about, or people are ashamed of, or there's so much secrecy, and we need to shine light on the hard truths of this epidemic.
Obviously, Julia Roberts, she's an Oscar-winning actress. Her career speaks for itself. But one of the things that I think is interesting about her particular casting in this role is that it sort of subverts that smile. One of the first things you see her do in the movie is flash that kind of Julia Roberts smile that we're all so familiar with, and yet we come to learn that that's a mask that she's wearing. And there's a moment where he says, I think her son says, they were worried about me coming back because of the triggers, here at home.
Yeah.
And a sort of subtext to that, I started thinking, well, what would be his triggers? And in a way, she might be one of his triggers, right?
No, I think one of the great ironies is that, and this is one of the challenges family members in this difficult situation encounter, is what is loving? The loving thing is sometimes the feels like the mean thing, the hard thing,
Right.
setting the boundary, saying no, calling bullshit, saying no, doesn't work, not accepting it.
And Courtney B. Vance's character, the stepfather, plays that
yeah,
role.
and you know, and clearly loves Ben and clearly loves his wife, but is trying to, you know, have an objective view of things and a sober view of things. But Holly, you know, she of course, anybody who's a parent who loves their child wants to be with their kid at the holidays, right? They, you know, and he does seem to be doing better, and maybe this is the best thing, and on some level nobody knows anything, you know. The tough love works on one person, but you know, tough love could send another person, you know, hurtling off the cliff, and so it seemed like an opportunity to explore, you know, without giving maybe an absolute solution, because, you know, that's I don't know if any movie could do that, but hopefully help engender some kind of conversation, or having people start to look at the various points of view, you know. And that's one of the things I wanted to do, was expand maybe people's capacity for compassion and understanding.
So in working with your son on this movie, were there any ground rules established?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it was very simple. The first one was my wife's idea, and he proposed it and said, Mom suggested that on the set I call you Peter and not Dad. And that was you know, language. Everything, many things start with language. If we start to get our language right, or more appropriately in tune with what is happening, things fall in place better often. And so when he would call me Peter, it reminded me that I'm a director. While we're on this set, I'm a director more than I'm a father. And it allowed him to be more of an actor on the set than a son. When Courtney B. Vance realized after the second day of filming, I don't know how he didn't know this, but he hadn't put together that Lucas and I were related. And when he heard Lucas call me Peter, what? You do not call your father by his first name. And I said, actually, he does, and we do, and that's how we roll. And he got it right away. But it was a funny moment. So
I'm almost out of time, but I actually want to come back around to The Odd Life of Timothy Green. You know, when you finish a project, obviously you move on, but that project stays out there, and you hear things, and people approach you about them and all that. And I'm just curious, are you aware of the podcast, How Did This Get Made? You ever heard of that podcast? They did an episode on that film, but the premise of the podcast is that they do movies that are outlandishly weird, or like, you know, ridiculous or something like that. But here's the good news, if you don't know about this. That's the one episode of that show where everybody on the show said, I love this movie. It turned the podcast.
Really?
Yeah, so I was just curious if you had heard
no,
of it.
I haven't heard of it. You know, it's that's such an interesting movie, because it was a very hard movie on my ego, because it was the first movie I'd been a part of that really got beat up pretty hard from the critics. And I should have seen it coming. I didn't see it coming. And I mean, I set out to make E.T. or Big, and obviously I'm not deluded. I mean, you know, those are, but you need to aim high every time. Yeah. And that's what I really tried to do, and I wanted to make this family movie, but the critics really feasted on it, and in a way that my ego was very wounded. But what's of course interesting is that for many people, and oftentimes people who feel different politically than I do, the middle of the country, for instance, it's a beloved movie, and people love it. Julia loves it. She watches it all the time, or did for a while with her kids. She told me they could do like scenes from the movie. And you know, you want to love all your kids, you know, and movies are kind of like children. You know, some are very popular, like Gilbert Grape's a very cool and popular movie and still has a very full life. And Timothy Green, you know, I'm happy that it, because you know, one of the things that my filmmaker friends and I always say, we want to say to people, like if you're watching, particularly streaming a movie of mine that I made and you hate it, get it off. There's so many movies to love, you know, and you know, I have movies I love and I have movies that didn't speak to me, but that for other people were so important. So I'm happy to hear that. How did this get made? I am gonna check it out. Thank you for the tip about Timothy Green. You know, it was that movie. I wanted to really explore what it meant to be a parent and how, you know, they commit a number of parental crimes in that movie.
Yeah, you said you confessed to some through that script.
Yeah, I did. But the number of people, like I would read, they go, they're terrible parents. I go, well, that's the point. The point is they're trying so hard, but they're doing terrible things. But because we're human, you know, and so this was such an interesting film, not only to make because of what it was about, but that I got to work with my favorite movie star ever, who I think is a brilliant actress and so good in the film. But that my son, one of my two sons, was in it. I get moments where I go, how did this happen? How did this happen? How did this get made? Maybe someday we'll do our own version of it. But anyway, thank you so much.
Yeah, it's been a great pleasure.
And so,
Best
hi
of luck with the
everybody.
film.
Go see Ben is Back, and if it's not working for you, slip out of the multiplex and go catch any number of the other films that are out that are so good.
All right, well, I hope it takes off for you.
Thank you. What a pleasure.
Thanks.
Thank you.